Hello and welcome to the Moody Meeple podcast, a podcast all about the wonderful world of tabletop gaming. My name is Steve and I'm joined by Dragon, David and Tom, and today we're going to be doing a very special post UK Games Expo 2021 episode. Hope you enjoy. Right, hello. So as I said, we're going to be doing a special episode about our time at the UK Games Expo. Dragon's going to be leading the conversation because he was the only one that couldn't go, unfortunately. So without further ado, over to you, Dragon.
Right, well, yes, the UK Games Expo is the largest hobby games convention in the UK. And it features a lot of various little things. So my first question is, did you make any plans as to what you wanted to achieve out of this trip up to the NEC? So Steve, you want to take that one for start?
Sure. Did I make any plans? So one thing I did do was I looked through all the new games to play and buy at the expo to gauge sort of initial interest in whether there were any games that sort of piqued my interest and whether there were any games that I wanted to go and have a look at, whether that's to playtest or just to have a quick gander. And then also just how to think about what kind of games that I maybe wanted to buy. I didn't have a specific list of games that I wanted to buy because I never have a very specific list. It's very sort of sporadic, my decisions. So yeah, I had an idea of the games I wanted to go and have a look at. Yeah. Other than that, we sort of organised between the three of us what kind of games we wanted to bring, because we figured it was potentially better to bring our own games to play. Yeah, when I say better, safer, I should say, with the COVID times, to bring our own games so that we're just playing within our sort of little circle, and then rather than going to the games library, which I mean probably would have been fine. But yeah, that's me.
Tom, did you have any plans?
Well, it depends on how how structured something needs to be called a plan. I would say my plan was very simple. It was to to be there to play some games in person with Steve and David for the first time in a long time, and to just see what's there, see if anything struck my fancy. I was pretty open to like buying new games that looked interesting, but I didn't go in with any specific intentions of I want to buy this specifically. I was just trying to keep it kind of loose and open, I guess.
And Dave, what were your thoughts about going up to the convention?
Yeah, so very similar to Tom in that I wanted to try and keep it a little loose. We obviously together organised a few games to play from our own collections for reasons that Steve said. But I was also interested in having a look at Solar Sphere, which is from the people that brought you Solar Storm, and Tinner's Trail. So I had a look at those being played when I snuck off to the convention side of the expo rather than where we were most of the time, which is in open gaming. But when I snuck into there, I had a look at Tinner's Trail, took some photos of it, and asked a few questions about play. It's got quite a nice aesthetic, but said that's kind of one of the things that I was trying to focus on. The other being Solar Sphere, that looks interesting. It's a much more complex game than Solar Storm was, so it was good to get to grips with that, with the authors being there.
So were those the only trade stands and publishers you were interested in, or was there anything else that caught your eye?
They were the ones that I was mostly interested in, from coming in, to make plans. When I was actually at the show, I looked at a few other different things. Some of the things were ideas that Steve had for games that he was interested in. It was good to have a look at those. So yeah, it was a bit more fluid once we got there. But the plans made up front were those.
I had like a list of games / publishers that I wanted to take a look at. They like I said, it was purely based on going through the list on the UK Games Expo website of like games that are new to play and games that were new to buy. Yeah, I ended up with a list of about, I don't know, I want to say like 7 different things. Most were sort of individual games. Like I had Solar Sphere down as well because we've played quite a lot of Solar Storm, so that was one that was immediately interested in. But I also had there's a few games I didn't really get to see at all, which was like a game called Iki or Iki. Sorry for my pronunciation. I believe it's Japanese. That game was being playtested somewhere, but it wasn't being sold anywhere. And I think The Adventures of Robin Hood as well, which was another one that sort of had my eye on. And I think we did approach the stand, but then decided. I think the person who was at the game sort of slipped off somewhere else. That was the Cosmos stand, so they had like other games that they had to sort of explain. So then we didn't actually have a massive look at that game. But yeah.
So that you're up there now, how is it dealing with people after the enforced absence of gaming?
Well, so I mean, the first thing was that basically anyone, not just the UK Games Expo, there was actually another convention there that was called Quilt Festival of World of Quilts, was it, or something like that? Which
I think Festival of Quilts?
Festival of Quilts, something like that, which had a very different demographic. But basically everyone that entered the NEC at all had to have a COVID pass, and if not a COVID pass, then a wristband from a previous day where you have shown your COVID pass. So yeah, basically to get into the building, full stop, regardless of whether you're going to any of the cons, you had to show your COVID pass. So I mean, initially that was one thing that was obviously different to normal conventions. I think although it felt fairly busy in this sort of trade hall, the traditional sort of convention hall, I think they had like a much reduced amount of people there that would be there usually. So there was very little queuing throughout the weekend really. It was a lot of so like for instance, whereas a couple of years ago they might have checked every single bag that came through the door, this time they had a metal detector, which we sort of hypothesized would detect whether you had any metal in your bag and then would randomly select people who did have metal in their bags to then search. So it was kind of a way of trying to keep deter anyone bringing anything weird in, while simultaneously keeping the line moving. So you just walked through the metal detector and then just kept, and that meant the line kept moving. So there was never any queues anywhere, which was quite nice. And then for the actual UK Games Expo tickets themselves, they had a whole hall dedicated to ticketing. And again, because there was a massively reduced amount of people there, we just basically walked up to a table and got our tickets. So apart from that, I mean, I think there was wider aisles, right? But aside from that, there wasn't really like masses of I guess people control or traffic control or whatever. Don't know if
Yeah,
David
there were
had-
quite a few, I guess, precautions they put in, as Steve described, and I guess that did kind of increase our confidence just being there, that we're less likely to, catch the virus or whatever. But I remember, for me, first arriving in the trade hall, was a bit of a shock to the system, because I mean, for me, this is definitely the first sort of big event that I've been to since the pandemic. And so just kind of, going up to a stall and suddenly there's all these people around was a bit of a shock to the system. So I definitely appreciated that in the actual hall where we played games, there was kind of this extra space between the tables, and there was kind of just enough space in there anyway that you kind of could be reasonably like far away from other people. Like I think when we were playing games, I don't think anyone even sat on the same part of the table as us. Like it was pretty well distanced really. And so it was quite nice when switching from the trade hall to there to kind of have that like bit of quiet, because I guess probably for all of us, like we're a bit more used to less people at the moment. So that was, I definitely appreciated that.
Did anyone else find it weird that they kind of had a jab van out the front there, where you could go and you get your own injection when you're having your lunch break or something?
Yeah, so they did have the NHS there with the van doing second. I think it was just second jabs, wasn't it? So you had to prove you'd had your first one, which we thought, I thought about, but then Tom quite rightly pointed out of, well, I mean, you don't really want to necessarily have any of the side effects of the jab while you're at a convention, and then also, as like Tom quite rightly pointed out, if we had picked up COVID, we'd not only be fighting the virus, we'd be fighting the vaccination as well. So maybe it was better on your body just to wait until 10 days or so afterwards. But yeah, there was some, actually pick up on what Tom said, there was definitely some sellers that were better than others when it came to how well they sort of spaced themselves out. So I mean, I would say Zatu, for instance, was a lot more spaced out and had a lot less games there than certainly 2019 when we went. But then when there were some other traders who there was one particular one, I won't say who it is because I don't want to. I did buy from them, so I don't want to speak negatively of them. But there was one particular company who had sort of like 2 or 3 sort of rows of games, and I think it was literally, it can't have been 2 meters. It must have been only like a meter and a half maybe between these 2 sort of shelves. And so if you were looking at games, you could get crammed in quite quickly, and that certainly for me got a bit hairy. It felt a bit hairy at times. So yeah, and like again to pick up on what Tom said about the open gaming table, with that one nice thing that we had is because there was so much space to other people. We were able to sort of sit down and just take our masks off and play, and just being able to take the mask off was quite a nice thing, because in a quite a stuffy, I mean the trade hall wasn't too bad, but in a quite a stuffy hall, having the mask on for a prolonged period of time didn't feel great. But then again, David and I picked up the UK Games Expo 2021 masks with cool dragons on the front, and they were actually pretty comfortable masks as well. So that it was quite nice that, although I don't think it was compulsory to wear masks, obviously UK Games Expo themselves were sort of promoting wearing a mask by selling them. So that's nice.
So, were there any actual highlights of the expo for you?
For me, the highlight was definitely just playing with other people a bit more, like in person. I think we managed to knock out a fair few games over the weekend we were there, and that was it was just fun to play with other people. To when you make a play, see their reaction across the table. When they're doing well, to see like them succeeding and being happy about that. Just those kind of little human things that kind of add to the board gaming experience. It was nice to have those back in that way.
Yeah, so I mean, for me as well, definitely playing around the table with other people was. It felt like a bit of a cliche of the weekend, a little bit like we were just like, it's just nice to be back and playing games with other people. I think we cracked out 9 games in the end. Some new, some old. Mainly games that well, at least one of us had played before. If I had to choose, trying to think of I think the best new game that we played for me personally was probably, I think, Dice Hospital. Was probably one of the ones that we played that was brand new. That was quite good, from Alleycat. And then I haven't played all the games I've bought yet, so I'll have to come back to that question of highlight in terms of new games. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it was nice to, like you both said, really, it's nice to play games with people physically in the same room as you. It's been a while, and definitely Dice Hospital was one of the highlights of us playing together. And I would also say I really enjoyed playing Dwellings of Evervale. I think there are certain aspects of it, me doing lots of dice rolls, that could have been better, but I think that was more because I'd got to the point where I was a little bit crazy and started doing things I shouldn't perhaps be doing for that game. And playing Solar Storm for the first time as a physical copy was great too. We've played it together as a group in our online play sessions, but we'd never played a physical copy. We still lost, we're still crap at it, but it was still good to play something that we'd all played before, but not physically. So it's good to get the kind of sense of how it plays physically, which is pretty much the same, to be fair. I think there's that slight, as Tom was saying, that bouncing off each other, especially in co-op games, that you really miss when you're playing them online. You still get it a little bit, but it's not the same. And yeah, I thought that was a great part of it. Another highlight for me personally was I got my copy of Solar Storm signed, and I was the first person to have asked the author to sign Solar Storm. That was a great experience.
Yeah, I was going to say as well that when we went over to the stand for Solar Sphere, the Dranda Games stand, it was actually Simon Milburn, one of the designers of the actual game, who was talking us through it, which we didn't really sort of realise until after we'd been talking to him. But it was pretty cool to see that you don't quite have. It's a bit strange to sort of see a game that you've Solar Storm we've played quite a few times. It's definitely one of the games that we've picked up over lockdown as a very good co-op game and one that we enjoy to play. Got a lot of replayability and like trying to win the game. So to actually just sort of meet the designers of it was pretty cool, to be honest.
Yeah, it was
So-
funny the way he just sort of we were talking for a good 5 minutes, I think, before he just sort of dropped in the conversation that he was the designer.
It's always cool to meet some of the actual designers of games. I know some of them can be a bit awkward, but when you actually get to speak to them, you can hear the passion of that they have for developing these games. So, if those were the highlights, were there any things which didn't live up to expectations, or where things could have been done better?
Oh, now you're asking.
Yeah.
It's a
I have
difficult
one.
one. Oh,
I have one.
I know what you're gonna say.
Food halls.
Oh no, that's not what I thought you were gonna say. But yeah, okay.
Okay. I have other ones as well, but I thought food halls was the first one. It was disappointing, and I know it's in kind of extreme circumstances. We're coming out of a pandemic and lockdowns and whatever, but there were lots of food courts that were closed. Like the subways of the world were all closed. Most of the coffee houses were closed, and these are places that could have allowed us to spread ourselves a little thinner. Instead, we ended up having to crowd around places that were open in order to get the things that we needed for sustenance. And we went out of the NEC kind of building to go to a kind of restaurant complex just to the side of it. And that was packed as well. We managed to book a table for the second night, but the first night we were kind of out on a limb. So we ended up going to, was it a carvery or something? I forget what it was.
That was
Hog
a
roast.
Hog roast
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
a van. Yeah, definitely would have been good if they'd given us like maybe a heads up just to say, hey, if you want to get food, maybe check out the building over there. Because I think we we ended up kind of losing a bit of time just looking for somewhere to eat that wasn't like full.
Yeah, and I think again, I don't want to speak too negatively of any particular party, but I feel like and a big respect to the people who were making sure COVID passes were checked on the way in. But aside from that, I do kind of feel like maybe we weren't particularly. I mean, shout out to the bus drivers at the NEC, right? Because we were staying at one hotel which had no real direct route to the halls that we were that the UK Games Expo was in. It was very strange. The hotel we were staying at is on sort of like the north side, and so it was really easy for us to get to the Festival of Quilts, but it was not so easy for us to actually get to the Games Expo, which I feel like is probably a problem the NEC has anyway. But I mean, shout out to the bus drivers who ended up taking us to the gaming halls anyway, because they were a lifesaver, certainly on the first 2 days. But it ended up that we had to do a lot more walking than maybe we expected to do on the weekend, because there wasn't quite. I didn't feel like we were quite as catered to as we potentially could have been. And then again, like to reiterate what David says, like I think there was 2 Waterstones in 2 different buildings, right? So there was the Waterstones in our building and the Waterstones in the Festival of Quilts building that were open. There was a coffee house in our building that was open.
Wait, you mean Weatherspoons, right?
What did I say?
Waterstones.
Oh, no, Weatherspoons. I meant Weatherspoons. Sorry. There was 2 Weatherspoons open in the whole of the NEC. And it's a massive place. So 2 Weatherstones for all of those people, and then I think like 1 cafe which closed like halfway through the day, and then another cafe, I think, like another place that you could just pick up a sandwich and stuff like that. So there was a lot, like none of the McColls were open, so you couldn't get like snacks from any of the shops. Like David was saying, the Subways weren't open, the Starbucks weren't open as well, and yeah, it was very strange. It was, and like David said, it's difficult to. You don't want to be too negative because we are in extreme circumstances, but it definitely felt like it would have been safer to have more places open. And I also slightly question. I mean, maybe for instance, with the Starbucks, maybe they just don't have the staff anymore, or something like that. But it did feel like they could have made money over the weekend. So it was a bit of a puzzling thing, and so yeah, I think that was mainly on the NEC side. Personally, I mean, maybe UK Games Expo could have given us more of a heads up if they had that heads up that many things weren't going to be open. I was lucky because I brought snacks, but the other 2 not so much.
Yeah. Additionally to that, I'd say like we had some difficulty actually buying some games from certain vendors. Some people obviously hadn't provided or provisioned for the fact that they would have to allow people, demonstrate their game, allow people to play their game, instruct them on playing, and also try to sell them. So there was one in particular, I'm not going to name them because that'd be a bit harsh, but I think it was like the first 2 days we got blanked by them trying to buy the game. So the third day it was like, this is a win or bust scenario. We're either going to come away with the game or we're just going to give up entirely. And because they were offering the game, I think, a little bit cheaper than elsewhere, it was one of those scenarios where we really wanted the game, but we couldn't, catch the eye of this person who was, beavering away trying to instruct people on how to play his game without realizing he's got, lost sales just behind him.
Yeah, I think. One thing I would say. I mean, I can't imagine we have many publishers listening or traders listening. But I mean, if we do, I guess a few words of advice from someone who. I mean, I don't know anything except that I used to work in retail, so I know a little bit about customer service. But positioning yourself with your back to people that would potentially be buying or wanting to buy your game is not a good idea. right? Immediately, anyone, especially in these times, that was the thing as well, right? We're in a time when, you know, touching someone, tapping someone on the shoulder is not really an appropriate thing to be doing. So really, we have to rely on eye contact a lot, or gesturing, or something like that. We have to rely on that because communication is difficult. We've got masks on, we're in a loud hall. Touching's like out of the question for obvious reasons. So for someone to be on a stool with trying to sell their game while simultaneously trying to you know, show their game to people that are sat down, positioning yourself with your back to people walking by, just yeah, not a good idea. And I think
another off-putting moment, wasn't it, when there were a few people that were going around the open gaming tables trying to give off leaflets and talk about their games. There's this one guy in particular who just kind of stood over Steve, kind of almost randomly rambling about his game right in Steve's face. He's not wearing a mask, and he's just come over to a table, which is obviously, we've separated ourselves from everyone else. We're kind of trying to keep our distance a little bit. And then there's this guy kind of towering over you, probably spitting on you while he's verbalizing this game that we really didn't have much of an interest in, because his attitude towards us and, you know, our personal space, we kind of didn't have much interest in what he was saying anyway.
That reminds me of one other thing that was suboptimal, which is like, it's maybe a little a little petty, but like the loudspeaker they were using was so obnoxious. It was just like it was one of these things where yeah, you could barely make out what they were saying because of how loud it was. But also, like a couple of times, like people actually like shouted down it as well, and it was like physically painful. And this is like when we're maybe in the middle of like playing a game or like looking at some stools or something, and it was just like a big disruption, and you could just see the looks on everyone's faces around that. Like this seemed to be something that like a lot of people were feeling the pain for.
Yeah, it just made me laugh out loud. I was on mute, so no one could hear it, thankfully. But
that
that one was particularly painful.
That's what I thought David was going to say originally about his biggest pet peeve was the flipping tannoy. It was one of those things where, like, I don't want to cast too much blame on the people at UK Games Expo, because they can't necessarily control the tannoy and how it sounds in a hall, right? That's partly on the NAC, but like Tom was saying, some of the now again, I want to give the benefit of the doubt, and like maybe the microphone that's used for the tannoy, you needed to speak above a certain volume for it to even pick you up. Like maybe the sensitivity was too high or something. But it was actually the people that spoke over the tannoy were way too loud most of the time. If when they were quieter, it actually picked up what they were saying a lot better. Yeah, I mean, again, I sort of understand that some of them were trying to sort of sell their, I think it was an event that they were trying to sort of persuade people to go to, but sort of basically screaming down the mic was not a way to sell your event to us, really. And yeah, I think maybe, I mean, again, I don't have no idea if they'd even be listening, but I mean, if anyone from UK Games Expo is listening, then maybe in future just sort of test how the tannoy sounds, and maybe test a few different, maybe try and find someone with that sort of correct register that just sort of works over the tannoy. I don't know. It's a difficult one to solve. I'm not a sound engineer, obviously, but and then also maybe NEC, just try and make it a bit better if you can. I appreciate it's probably quite a difficult thing to solve a tannoy in an echoey hallway. It's probably not the easiest thing to solve, but still, yeah, it was pretty horrible. Maybe alternate ways of advertising events might be better.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd like to just point out that whilst we have probably spent the last 15 minutes complaining, you know, we are, in some ways, we're nitpicking a little bit. The show was great, and these are the things that we think could have been better.
Yeah,
Actually,
and it's also worth highlighting that a lot of these things are like periphery, like things like the food available and the announcements. Like, but the show itself, like what we were actually engaging with, like I think we all enjoyed.
For sure. And actually, one thing that's just come to mind that we should really give a shout out, it probably should have been part of the highlights section, was the actual people running the show. The people that were on the doors checking passes. They were always there's quite often someone in I think it was a blue shirt that was just there throughout the day just to go, hi, how you doing? How you enjoying the show? And like there were obviously the people that check your tickets, who just sort of, sit there, check your tickets, and some of them were sort of friendlier than others. And then there was these particular people that were clearly there to just check that everyone's okay coming in and out, which is a lovely touch. You don't get that at other Comic-Cons and things. So it was really nice when you sort of came out to, go to the loo or fill your water bottle up, and you just had someone going, hey, how you doing? You during the show? And you just be like, yeah, thanks very much, and that'd be it. But, I can kind of imagine if someone needed some help, then you knew that person was there and they were friendly. So yeah, big shout out to the people running the event.
So also because of the ongoing restrictions, they didn't have the bring and buy stand this year. Are you someone who would sell or buy from a bring and buy?
I know for me personally, I probably would have brought some stuff to sell this year, especially to make way for games that I probably would have been buying at the event. I've got a few things that are on my sort of sell list at the moment. So yeah, it would have been nice to. I'm not. We didn't do it in 2019. I wasn't even aware that was a thing you could do. So it'd be nice to try it out one year. I don't know how effective it is, but yeah. And then maybe I would have bought some stuff if it was a bit cheaper than the original copies. But again, I think with the restrictions, it completely makes sense that they didn't run that.
Yeah, I would have definitely used it as well. Actually, some of the stuff that I was planning on listing on the bring and buy for last year, obviously it didn't happen, Dragon Ball anyway. But there are certain games that still are sitting on my shelf. They're still sealed. They're not games that I'm likely to play anytime soon. And I'm thinking, can I make way for something that's going to have more playability, across my family or with this gaming group? And then just swapping it out for something that would be played more.
Yeah, I can't say it was something that I considered a lot before the expo, but yeah, I've kind of been realizing that there probably are some games that I'd be interested in, like passing on at some point. So I think probably next time, if it's available, I'll definitely consider it.
I think for me, game rotation is something that I'm becoming more and more aware of as I slowly run out of space in our small flat. So yeah, it's definitely something that I'd probably plan to make a use of, and it's that bit easier, right, than using something like eBay or whatever to sell your games, because it's like there and then, cash in hand, happy days.
I think if I was doing that though, one thing that I wished I'd done this year is brought something with wheels on to like kind of transport games between the hotel and the expo. Like maybe a cart, or maybe I should have brought a suitcase, because I thought of that before. But yeah, something like that I think would definitely be essential for buying and selling games.
I think it's difficult to know really, because obviously this year we did spend most of our time in the open gaming section of the expo. It's difficult to know whether in sort of normal times whether we would have done that as much, because I remember in 2019 the hall was that bit bigger, the trade hall was that bit bigger that it didn't really feel like we could get around it even in a day, whereas this year we got around the trade hall in pretty much a day and then just sort of went to and fro for the rest of the weekend as we felt like we wanted to or needed to. So maybe in future we might need to take less games, but also yeah, I think we saw someone, didn't we, with like a full like cart, which
Yeah,
I mean, if you're planning to spend a day in the open gaming section might not be a bad purchase because you just chuck all your snacks and food and games in this one cart for the whole group, and then you just, pull it along. Yeah.
They have ones that fold almost telescopically, so they sound pretty good. I don't know what this madness was about bringing less games, Steve. I don't agree with that.
Well, bring less games to buy more games.
I guess we might be more
that I can get on board
open
with.
we might be more open to using the library as well in future years, I guess. But
Yeah.
if we're talking about selling games as well, there'll be, I guess, we'll essentially be exchanging the games that we carried to play this year for, in future years, games that we want to sell.
Same games in as games out.
So there's other conventions around the UK, like Dragon Meet here in London, which would be in December. Are you considering that, or you going back to the NEC next year?
I think we're definitely considering going back to the NEC. I think we still really haven't been for a normal weekend at the UK Games Expo, because in 2019 we went for a day. This year, obviously, it was sort of COVID, a COVID expo, so it was a bit sort of reduced in terms of size, etc. So we've yet to have sort of full 2-3 days at a proper UK Games Expo. So it's definitely something that we still want to do. Other conventions, I mean, maybe it's difficult to sort of commit to stuff. I think personally, there's Gen Con, which I'm sort of vaguely aware of. That I know, I think one of our friends is going to. I don't know if that's virtual or not anymore. I think it's a mixture of both. And then maybe Dragon Meet one year as well. Again, it's going to depend on whether they go ahead and the climate of restrictions, etc.
Me, I'm definitely open to maybe going to other conventions. I guess I haven't specifically looked into any. I know you've spoken of Dragon Meet before and spoken of it quite highly, I think. So it sounds like it could be something interesting. But yeah, definitely for the UK Games Expo, I'm up for going again next year, I think.
Yeah. I think we said that we would probably go to the expo again. I think Dragon has also raised an interest there. I think I might go to Dragon Meet or something that I can do for a day trip, because then I can bring the kids along and they'd enjoy that. It's a lot harder to bring them to something like the NEC when I want to spend a weekend there playing games, because they're going to get bored out of their minds for a weekend. But a day trip they could probably do. So that's why I might be open to other expos as well.
And actually, an expo in London for us is obviously has its advantages of that we can probably go home afterwards, right? Where NEC is obviously over in Birmingham, so that's we have to make a. We have done it in a day, but it wasn't. It was a chock full day with not as much gaming as we would have liked. So yeah. That'd be one.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why we went weekend, wasn't it? So that we could get a bit more gaming in. The other expo I was thinking of, I couldn't quite pin it down, was Tabletop Gaming Live, which is at the Alexandra Palace, and that's in late September.
Well, that's about all the questions I've got. So what are your final thoughts on the actual expo then?
Yeah, it was definitely fun to play together. It was definitely a weird experience being back in sort of trading halls again, and it was a bit hairy at times. But it was fun to see some of the publishers again and have a look at some newer games and get some ideas for games that we potentially buy or maybe kickstart in the future. There was a few games that I still actually wanted to talk a little bit about. And I guess we can go around and talk about what games we were maybe excited to see that we maybe didn't get a chance to either buy or play just yet. So I mean, one game that I bought that's new this year is Die of the Dead, which is a game based on. Now I need to make sure I pronounce this correctly. Dia de Muertos. So the Day of the Dead. The sort of I think it's a Spanish/Mexican holiday, South American holiday, around sort of Halloween time. If you've ever seen the movie Coco, it's sort of the similar aesthetic, and the whole game is if you're an onlooker, it looks quite morbid because you're rolling dice in caskets, in coffins, effectively. But it's quite tastefully all about the going up to the land of the living. So again, if you've ever seen Coco, it's Dia de Muertos is all about those kinds of land of the living and land of the dead coming together and sort of celebrating, family members that have died, etc. So it's a really nice looking game. I've actually managed to play it, and it's a sort of fun little quick dice rolling game. There was another game that we spoke to the I think the designer. I don't think he was the designer, but the designer was sat there playing it while we were having the sort of kind of sales pitch, and that was This War Without an Enemy, which is based all about the English Civil War, the Second English Civil War, so parliamentarians versus royalists, between certain, I can't remember the years exactly, but it's based on that war between the certain years, and that had a really, really interesting mechanic that we were quite intrigued by. The pieces, the board was basically a map of England, Wales, and obviously you set up different, I think, scenarios of the different armies. There's sort of two cool mechanics that sort of drew us to the game was the fact that the pieces had a kind of fog of war, so your opponent could see where units were, but couldn't see what those units actually were, if that makes sense. So you could see where the units were deployed, but you couldn't see what those units were. So they could be cavalry, infantry, that kind of stuff. And then also they had a kind of when you got into a battle, you would sort of move the pieces to a little sort of battle map on the side, which sort of reminded us a little bit of games like Total War, that kind of sort of, I don't know, war strategy games, things like that. And finally, sorry, one more game that I want to quickly talk about that this isn't a game that I approached the expo thinking that I was going to be interested in. I didn't even know it was going to be there. But one game that immediately caught our eye was Senjutsu Battle for Japan, which I think is being kickstarted at some point, and it looks amazing. It's a 1 to 4 player sort of dueling game. So it's a very small map, and you just have like one figure each, which are these sort of beautiful samurai figures, and they're just sort of little dueling games, and it's based on historic Japan, and looks absolutely like a stunning game, which is playable within sort of 20 minutes. So it's like a very quick but very good looking game, which I'd love to take a look at. So yeah, they're kind of my sort of highlighted games, I suppose, that we sort of maybe didn't get to play or look at the expo itself. But yeah, don't know what the other two think.
Yeah, pretty much. I would also throw in Solar Sphere that we didn't manage to play. We got to look at, and we had the whole gameplay kind of described to us, but we didn't actually get to play it. It would have been nice to give that a go. I think also the Dice Hospital expansions, we didn't get around to playing those, and it would have been nice to do so. They won an award actually at the UKGE, I believe, and it would have been nice to play those too.
Yeah, I think they won best variant or expansion to a game. Yeah, that was one thing that maybe I slightly regret, actually, is that we didn't catch the awards. We didn't go to any of the events again. A, because we weren't really seeking. Well, we didn't really look up what the events were, and B, obviously, it was quite difficult for me personally to get motivated about things where you'd be in confined spaces with strangers. So that's why maybe the events and the sort of lecture halls things didn't take my fancy.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think maybe next time I'm thinking I might try to look into the events a bit more, particularly because hopefully by UK Games Expo 2022, maybe the pandemic will be a distant memory. Probably a bit too optimistic, but for me, I don't know if I think there were a lot of games there, and you guys have touched on a lot of them that I guess looked cool or looked pretty, but I don't know if there was anything that really blew me away on the exhibition front. I did pick up a couple of small card games, so I picked up Imperium Classics and Legends, as well as a trick-taking game tournament for Camelot, which I haven't played any of them yet. They look exciting, and I'm looking forward to playing them. I think Imperium Classic won one of the awards, which I was surprised about. But I think they got the People's Choice for strategy card games. But yeah, very excited to play them at some point.
One People's Choice for best new card game strategic. Yeah, exactly right. Imperium Classics. So yeah, it might have been quite nice to look into. I didn't really look into none of the games that were up for awards. Really, immediately sort of leaped out to me as games to play. But maybe that's something again in the future to sort of keep an eye on what's being nominated, because that might give us a good indication of what we should try and play.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I think for both me and for the one that the expansion that David picked up, we had no idea that they had won awards or anything. It was a happy. I guess it was a nice surprise at the end. It's oh, that game I got has won something. But yeah, definitely, I think it's worth using that as a tool for discovering new stuff.
I think the expo, for me personally, was just a nice way of revitalizing my wish list a little bit as well. So, okay, there was a few games that I just straight up bought, but I've come away from the expo and I've got sort of a few things that have popped on my wish list that maybe weren't new or whatever. They're existing games that just sort of been reminded that I would like to have. I think Villainous went on there because there was loads of different copies of different types of Villainous. So we were chatting about that over the course of the weekend a lot. I've been chucked on my wish list. After playing Dice Hospital, again, not wanting to necessarily buy games that we've already bought within the group, I've had a look at Dice Theme Park, which I'm surprised didn't have more of a presence, actually. I don't remember seeing it at all. It's another one from Alley Cat Games, like a sort of a sequel to Dice Hospital, that's quite recently been kickstarted. I was sort of surprised.
Yeah, I backed that.
Yeah. I was sort of surprised I didn't see it being place tested, but maybe they thought people have pre-ordered it so they can wait. But yeah, I think that just about sums it up for me personally. Yeah, I mean, just want to reiterate, thanks to all the people at UK Games Expo for running it. I haven't heard any bad news about the number of people getting COVID or whatever, so it seems for all intents and purposes to have been a very successful event, and that's almost certainly down to the people that ran it, so definitely thank you and congratulations to those people. I can imagine it wasn't easy. So yeah, and obviously big thanks to the NEC for hosting as well, and giving us a safe place to play games. Apart from that, I think that's everything from me.
I just wish I could have gone as well.
Yeah, we wish you could have been there, Dragon. We wish you could have been there.
It'll have to be next year.
We'll all go with our dragon mask next year. I wanted to quickly shout out a viewer. Obviously, every week, every podcast, we ask you to send in your thoughts about the topics that we talk about. Shout out to the Denise Drake, who on our last episode, all about upgrading board games. We talked about painting and we talked about do-it-yourself upgrades. Very, very interesting thing that they mentioned was that they like to sew things and to make things out of scraps and materials. So rather than using plastic baggies, they'll make sort of fabric pouches for their sort of pieces and wallets, which I thought was a very good and eco-friendly way of organising your board games. So shout out to them. This week, if you've got any thoughts about, I don't know, maybe you were at the UK Games Expo. I feel like that's a very small niche audience that we might be shouting out to them. But maybe share your best experience if you were there at UK Games Expo. If you weren't, maybe your best experiences of a new board game that you found at a convention or something of that description. I feel like that's quite a niche question to ask, but there we go. If it applies to you, then great. Without further ado, thanks, Dragon, for running this podcast this week. Obviously, it was very sad that you couldn't be at UK Games Expo with us. Thanks to Tom and David for coming and talking through your experience at UK Games Expo as well. And yeah, we will see. Thanks for everyone who's watching in the stream, and thanks to anyone who's listening. So yeah, we will see you next time, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.